Welcome to another episode of Pit Lane Parlay.
Welcome to Pit Lane Parlay. My name is host Mike Jokum. David Byrd joins me on the line right now, and I'll be joined later on in this special episode by none other than Santino Ferrucci. David, how you doing today out in Arizona?
Fantastic. Couldn't be any better. How are you?
Well, I'm a little jealous that you're in Arizona because it's cold and rainy here. So I'm kind of tired of the winter and looking forward to racetrack season.
Well, honestly, it was a little chilly today. We were at a racetrack today, which we'll obviously talking about a little bit. But started out a little cold, a lot of wind, but it got pretty nice. But honestly, being able to be at a racetrack in the middle of December, can't complain too much about that.
No, very jealous. I was very jealous when I saw the social media about that today. So we'll start with that. Santino tested one of your sprint cars today out in Arizona. Before I get to how it was, how did this all come about from the start?
So I was in Indy for the BC39 and flying out after the race was over and sitting at the airport, and Santino comes strolling up and spots me and says, hey, and sits down, and we're just chatting. And he asked, of course, we ran Connor Daly in the Petrie Motorsports midget that I'm partnering with Scott Petrie on this year for a few races and hopefully next year as well. And he asked how that all came about, and we talked about it a little bit. I talked about how the goal of that Petrie midget is to get some crossover, to get interested IndyCar drivers and others that have a desire to maybe try their hand at some dirt track racing. It's a midget that's going to be available for them. And I told them that, the problem was there weren't a lot of IndyCar drivers, to my knowledge, that I've put it out there to that have been interested in taking that shot to make that happen. And he just, like I said, he threw up his hand, kind of said, I'll do it. So I said, seriously? And he said, absolutely. I want to race. I want to race anything I can race whenever I can race. So I said, well, let's get you through the season and see how the fall shapes up, and then see if we can get you in that midget or something else. So that was how the conversation started. But then what happened was I arranged for the sprint car and a midget out here in Arizona with my partner, Team Gene Gala Racing, and my one of the drivers I work with, and actually one of my business partners, Dennis Guile. For him and both James Davison, actually, which we ran James a few weeks ago out here in the sprint car. They're supposed to run the sprint car and the midget. Unfortunately, on Turkey night out at Ventura Raceway, CJ Leary got on his lid and destroyed that midget, so left us with just the sprint car. So that was the sprint car that Santino ran today. And tell you what, he had the same experience as Davison a few weeks ago. Just had a smile on his face the entire time. Had a blast, and he's ready to go racing on the dirt. That's kind of the quick story how that all came about.
So, I saw, a clip or two on social media of both that. And I think I saw something from Davison a few weeks ago. But how did both drivers do on the dirt? Do you think they can be successful in the dirt racing?
Absolutely successful. It will take time. Obviously, they're both pros. James has a wide variety of experience. Obviously, he's between Indy cars and sports cars and stock cars and old Formula One cars and old sports cars and Silver Crown car. So he's very adaptable as far as that goes. He got up to speed pretty quickly and turning lap times within 0.2 of a second off the current USAC sprint car champion. Granted, that's on an empty track with just two cars. Whole different ball game. Once you put 24 cars on the track and see what happens. But Santino's a little bit. His field of expertise is a little more direct, mostly from karts to Formula cars all the way to IndyCar. So he really didn't have the variety of experience, but also got up to speed really quick. Both guys, pushed the limits, found the limits. Got looped around a couple times and kind of slid off the top of the track. Canyon Speedway doesn't have any walls, which makes it a nice place to get your first experience. So you just slide over the top of the berm and come back over. But you would expect that from guys that are used to kind of pushing the limit and finding the limit. And both look really good. I think if I was put a stopwatch on it, I would say that maybe Davison was a little quicker through 3-4 when he had the chance to run. But I think we also were fine tuning the car a little more. We had the current USAC champion crew chief there to kind of crew the car and kind of do some extra setup work. And we had CJ Leary there, the current USAC Sprint Car champion, as his kind of driver coach. Whereas today was really, we just kept kind of a baseline setup on the car and just let Santino turn laps without the benefit of the tuning. So yeah, just given time, obviously it's a challenge for anybody to change disciplines and to do something that's extraordinarily counterintuitive to really anything that they've ever done before. But Santino was really picking up on some of the subtle nuances that you have to have in place to drive a sprint car well, and saw a couple times where, he started to get in trouble a little bit, but he did the thing that you needed to do to get out of trouble, which would be, kind of use the throttle, where the normal thing you would do and what he would do would be get out of the throttle and steer your way out of trouble. So he was actually adapting really quickly. So I think that I wouldn't be surprised if both those guys were in a little smaller car come January at a little event in Tulsa. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Oh, I like what I hear. I'll definitely I'll be tuning in no matter what to that event you talk about. But definitely be tuning into their races if so. So you mentioned James Davison last week or over the weekend. It came out that he's actually tipped to run both the Daytona 500 and the Indy 500 with you as a partner in both entries.
Yes, sir.
How did the Daytona 500 portion come up? And I have a few more questions about the Daytona side of things after we start there.
Well, I'll probably answer the questions that you have as part of my answer of how the Daytona thing came up. So basically it was in September, I do believe, if memory serves, where James had actually mentioned to me that he'd like to run the Daytona 500 sometime, just as a bucket list item for a driver, obviously, and so I kind of just saw that the way in the memory bank, but also at the same time said, well, that's great, but you can't they're not going to let you just go run the Daytona 500. You're going to have to do ARCA or Xfinity or trucks at Daytona or Talladega before they let you run the 500. And he said, well, we'll see about that. So, he called off to NASCAR and talked to their director of competition or whoever does all the driver approvals. And within a day, he had an email in hand with approval to run all Cup tracks, all Cup races in 2020 with no exceptions, no restrictions. And I was a little surprised at that, but I guess 5 Indy 500s must count for something. And so I said, well, okay. So had that in the back of my mind. I mean, I'm not really a guy that's looking to do stuff in NASCAR, but I'm always looking to do stuff that's interesting. So my sprint car partner, Brody Hayward, one of my other sprint car partners, Brody Hayward, he was in conversation with a sponsor, and that sponsor, turned out to be Oil Fire Whiskey. That's going to be the primary sponsor there for James at Daytona, and then one of our associate sponsors at the 500. He was talking to them about a sprint car program, and that sprint car program, or a short track program, I should say, with sprint car and midget crossing lines to both, starting with the Chili Bowl because of a Tulsa connection with Oil Fire. So he was trying to put the program together, and they expressed interest in maybe expanding it and in terms of the dollars, saying, well, could it be a NASCAR component? Because we've done some NASCAR stuff. Could it be an Indy 500 component? And we said, certainly. And this was right after James had told me he had been approved to run Daytona. And I said, well, this could be an interesting story. So I told Brody that. He told Oil Fire that. Oil Fire says, well, wow, if you can make that happen, then we're totally in on that. So A, B, C, D, just, one thing leads to another. And here we are, we were able to announce that everything's in place. Well, we weren't able to announce everything that is in place for James to run Daytona and Indy, but everything's in place to run Daytona and Indy. And that's kind of where things stand at this point. So we'll have all the partner team announcements for both ends of that. Probably, if not within the next week, certainly, first of the year. Everything kind of gets slowed down around Christmas time, obviously.
You were right. You did answer my next question without me bringing it up. The whole approval process thing. I've seen plenty of people commenting on social media about that, and I was reading your replies throughout the weekend. So I will move on here. James is one of the more remarkable drivers in my era. For he's done just about a little bit of everything over the last handful of years. Indy 500, Xfinity Series, tested on the dirt track. I'm pretty sure he's done some sports car stuff in there somewhere.
Yep, he has.
What makes him so special and so talented at everything he does?
That's a hard question to answer. He brings, you may not see it from the outside, but he brings a lot of humility to the racetrack. Every time he gets a chance to race and steps into an unfamiliar territory, he's really a sponge. He just absorbs everything as quickly as he can. He's truly a student of racing. He's truly a student of racing. And when he gets the opportunity to try something new, he really does a deep dive into finding everything he can on it. So when it was time to run Silver Crown, he was watching YouTube videos constantly on Silver Crown races and in-car and out and, outboard, and really just trying to see as much as he could learn before he got in the car. And he does that every time he gets a chance to race, no matter what it is. Obviously, a professional driver is a professional driver. They should be able to, if you've been able to make your way to the point where you can get into an IndyCar and be competitive, you should be able to position yourself to be competitive in almost anything that you do when you get the chance to do it. And he also just realizes that in his position, he still wants to be able to race for a living. So he has to make the most out of every opportunity as well. And I think that plays into the way he approaches things. And he's just always very grateful. Like I said, very, very, very humble, brings a lot of humility, as I said, to each effort that he has the chance to, that he has the chance to obtain. And I think it shows. So we've actually, I'll tease it a little bit. We've announced Daytona, we've announced, Indy, that we're going to do both of those. Again, partner announcements coming up, but we're not done. There's more to come.
I love what I hear. I can't wait for the announcements. You're sure to keep what's been a wild off season even more entertaining. On that note, I'll go to a general IndyCar question here. Now that Roger Penske owns IndyCar, what did you think about the whole, Roger Penske's now in charge of everything, and your thoughts on IndyCar's future heading forward over the next couple of years?
Well, I think IndyCar was already on a nice trajectory with a nice upswing and, good economy right now as well in the country, which, always bodes well for racing when that is the case. But so with IndyCar on upswing as it was, Penske being in charge of everything IndyCar related can't do anything but make it better. Roger's the standard bearer. He's what we all strive to be, or what we all should at least strive to be when it comes to sustainability of your operations, the preparation, the excellence of the sport and execution of everything. So I don't know that there's any drawbacks whatsoever to Penske's involvement, and I'm excited for what that's going to portend for the future. The one thing I would want to see, and it's not going to happen, but the one thing I would want to see in terms of rule change, I know you didn't ask this question, but heck, I'll put it out there, is
yeah, let's go for it.
It's one thing that Rogers is least likely to probably implement, even though I know that Jay Fry has his eye on it, is spec shocks. If they would just kind of get away from the massive investment that goes into the shock programs for all these teams, I think you would see, 4 or 5 new teams kind of probably get on board relatively quickly, which would, help alleviate some of the challenges of, feeling like there's a shortage of teams, or, sense that there's too much concentrated and just the Penske, Ganassi, Andretti, just having to rely on too much on just 3 or 4 teams, just because it's James and I even had a meeting with a company, a couple of meetings and multiple conversations with a company that has actually made significant investments in motorsports in the last couple of years, and even during this off season, who was interested in starting up a new IndyCar team, but the expectation was that we needed to be competitive, and we were very frank and honest with him that unless we had the additional budget to work within Andretti or another team to do a technology agreement that would be a 7-figure investment, we were not going to be able to promise him that we were going to be able to be competitive no matter how strong James is as a driver behind the wheel. And it actually made it to where that sponsor ended up going elsewhere and taking significant dollars to other disciplines. So I've seen it firsthand, and I've heard it secondhand, and I just know that's an area that really doesn't show up for the fans at all. But I understand this also at the same time that you can't take everything spec. But at the same time, I also would say that if it improves the show, there's certain areas of investment that just don't improve the show, but certainly give some teams that can invest it and have invested in it over the course of the years a significant competitive advantage.
Yeah, very interesting insight there. I'm curious to see everybody listening what you think on that topic. So I think you kind of answered my next question here, so I'm going to save it for a couple minutes from now. With the Aeroscreen being implemented in 2020, your general thoughts on the Aeroscreen and if you have any concerns after you've seen the testing so far this 2019-2020 offseason? My
first thought is it's more sponsor space, which I can always use. Second thought is it's obviously great for driver protection. It's certainly an advancement in safety. Apart from that, I don't really have any additional thoughts. It's clearly well thought out. It's being practically implemented, I do believe, and if I think that the IndyCar technical staff is enough on top of things that if it does pose significant challenges, that those challenges will be addressed as they need to be. But I like that, my car, as my cars are pretty busy. So the ability to have some more space to put sponsors and logos that's good for me.
Yeah. The Scott Dixon car that was at the PRI Expo this weekend with the completed Aeroscreen, like there was some space for some extra sponsors up there, which looked very nice.
Sure. And the only complaint I would say is it looks great, except from the head-on shot from the front. Would be my only complaint. But as Robin Miller has written a few times in his mailbag when people talked about it, it'll take about half a practice session to get used to it, and then that complaint will be addressed.
Yeah, and there's probably not too many times that we'll be staring directly at the front of an Indy car unless it's not moving. So
yeah,
fair point. I definitely see that. So my two more questions for you here is one is, do you have any additional IndyCar 2020 plans outside of the 500? I know you kind of alluded to you've got plenty to talk about, but not necessarily IndyCar related, correct?
Nothing IndyCar related, not at the moment. We'll see how Indy goes and see what comes from there. Obviously, the goal, and we think that we'll be able to pick right up where we left off, let's say last year at Indy, and move forward. So obviously the goal is to be competitive and put ourselves in a position to win, which I don't think is far-fetched. And, obviously if a win or a very strong finish at Indianapolis happens, then we'll see what happens going forward. And of course, if that does happen, and then, you never know in terms of, other drivers and ovals and, what opportunities present themselves. I would think a strong finish at Indianapolis would certainly position James to get picked up, maybe to drive some other ovals, even though that's, not exactly it's not his forte. Just obviously this race, the bulk of his IndyCar races, all but two have come on ovals or come at Indy, so have been on ovals. So, but nothing's really in the plans. But you never know what can happen. But I wouldn't put any money on it, let's say.
I like it. Well, I think you guys are, judging by last year, in a good position to have another good running at the 500. So I'll wrap it up with you with one final question here. If you were to predict the 2020 IndyCar champion and Indy 500 champion, who are your picks?
Well, I don't want to pick against my guy, obviously, at Indy. So let's just say, I'm going to go with my heart at Indy and say James Davison for the 500. IndyCar champion. Wow. It's obviously it's hard to bet against any of the Penske drivers. Scott Dixon, these are obviously people who are going to, let's say Rossi. Let's say it's Rossi's year. I'll go with Alexander Rossi.
I like it. I think he's primed for a good year.
Yep.
Well, David, thanks very much for some time tonight.
My pleasure.
After a brief pause, we'll be joined by Santino. Back for the second half of this special episode with our pal Santino Ferrucci. Santino, how you doing, man?
Dude, doing good. Just enjoying some time out in Phoenix, Arizona, driving sprint cars and going to golf tournaments.
Yeah, it seems much better than being in the cold Northeast this time of year.
Yeah, tell me about it. It's we got a lot of snow just recently, and I am very happy to be down in the south here.
Yeah, I don't blame you at all. So with that being said, we'll start with the sprint car that you were talking about with David Byrd, who I just got off the phone with. What was it like driving a sprint car today? How'd you feel? Do you feel that it's viable to race in the future in addition to IndyCar?
Dude, let me say it's weird getting strapped into something where you're sitting past upright with a V8 engine between your ankles and a drive shaft going below your butt. And no, it was one of the most interesting cars I've ever driven, and probably along the more fun ones too. I mean, there's nothing like a little bit of good old American race car and some grassroots racing.
Yeah, I for everybody listening out there, if you have one goal for 2020, it's to get to a dirt track. It's a lot of fun to watch that racing. So we heard it from David's perspective, but from your point of view, what got you interested in this? How did the whole thing come about from your end?
What's funny is me and David were sitting in an airport across from each other, and we just got to talking and everything, and he just brought up the idea of, hey man, if I could put you in a sprint car and a midget, would you do it? And I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, thinking to myself, like, yeah, okay. Like, I would ever be doing something on dirt in my career. And dude, he freaking calls me up and sends me a text and says, all right, pick your test date. And I was like, all right. I got my foot in my mouth, and I'm about to book plane tickets down to Phoenix, and we're about to do this.
That's awesome.
So it was pretty funny. It was a great experience.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of fun. I tried my hand at the sprint car racing and iRacing when I still had a wheel, and it was pretty bad. So my sprint car career ended quickly. Jumping over to IndyCar, man, where to start? There's plenty of news in the Dale Coyne world to talk about this winter. It's been rumored after Sebastian Bourdais unfortunately had to leave Dale Coyne Racing that your potential new teammate will be F2 driver Alex Palou. I don't know if you know anything about him from your European racing days, but just curious to see your thoughts there, and if you do know anything about him.
I mean, I'm not announced yet, and I'm still working with trying to figure it out with Dale and all those guys. So, man, I'm kind of, I'm going day by day, but nothing set in stone, nothing official. And but I do know Alex pretty well from back in the karting days, and he's a good kid, and if things all come together for both of us, it would be, I think it'd be an interesting team to say the least. So. But we got a little bit of a road to go. Yeah,
fair point there. I know I was assuming that you'll be back, and fingers crossed that will happen. But you got to test the Aeroscreen down in Sebring back in early November. What'd you think of the tests, the Aeroscreen, and do you think there would be any minor adjustments to the Aeroscreen that you'd like to see before the season starts?
To be honest with you, I think IndyCar did a pretty damn good job with the thing. And I was expecting a lot of warped vision or loss of where I was, and when I sat in it, and for the first time I was kind of more taken back by the fact that it's actually not that bad. And looking at it, to be honest, I think it looks better than the Halo. Having driven the cars with Halos, And, driving with it, the experience, honestly, was pretty good. I think we have a little bit of development to go. I was pretty impressed with how we did the cooling, how that development had come along very quickly. And, I think it's very, very doable thing. And I'm very excited to see it on all the cars coming next season.
I love it. From a setup perspective and a tire wear perspective, do you foresee major setup changes from the, obviously limited testing you had, and B, do you think it'll make a major difference on those Firestone tires?
I'm not sure. I didn't really get into too much depth with the setup with the team. I did like the way that the car handled much more with the Aeroscreen than without it. I just think that it, that extra bit of top weight, made the car a lot more playful. And the tire that I tested on in Sebring, it held up, man. I mean, I got one set of just new tires at the end of the day, and I was able to put about eight push laps into it. And, my fastest lap was I think lap 5 or 6 or something like that, which is pretty awesome. And, I think that Firestone's going to be pretty ready. And I think the setups aren't going to change too much or be too different from last year.
That's awesome. So one Dale Coyne change that I wanted to bring up to see what you thought and maybe how it'll affect the team is both Michael Cannon and Craig Hampson, as of this morning, have left Dale Coyne for other opportunities. Do you think that will have a big effect on the team, as they're pretty well renowned, or is Dale Coyne going to keep rocking and rolling like they have been the last couple of years?
I mean, assuming that everything goes to plan and we end up there, and it's hard to say. Craig was a huge asset. Mike, for my rookie year, was a huge asset, and watching Mike leave, I kind of understand it from a personal standpoint more than anything, and I'm really happy for him. And I can't thank him enough for the experience over the last year and a half. So, people move on team to team, and I still would technically have Olivier having everything work out. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it.
Nice. Yeah, I think you're in good hands with him here. I've heard very good things about him. Not that I've talked to him before, but I've heard he's a pretty smart guy.
Oh yeah, that's putting it lightly.
So, you just mentioned your rookie year. It was, a rookie year to remember, and you've had a couple of months now to kind of reflect back on 2019. Does that do anything to change or heighten your expectations for, going into 2020, no matter where you end up?
I think I have a lot to work with from my rookie year. I have a lot of oval experience now, a lot more to look forward to with the 500. And now I know all the road and street courses, which is a huge thing coming back as a second-year driver. I'm up to speed a lot faster. I understand what I need out of the car for that race weekend. And, we're not necessarily figuring out going into last final warm-up or the race. We're going to have it all dialed in by the time we get there. So I think that's a big deal for me, and I think that'll be a big deal for the teams. But it'll be fun. I'm really looking forward to the sophomore year. I think we can definitely win some races.
Hey, I love what I hear there. So in addition to testing a sprint car, testing a Sebring, racing wise, what else have you had going on in what are we, month 3 of the off season already?
Yeah, I've done a couple of karting events, actually at my home track, the track I grew up on in New York. And funny enough, the one I was leading in the rain, the chain snapped. And the other big one, we had some issues with the inside the motor. They have what's called reeds, and we had a couple of reeds crack, unfortunately. So we haven't had the best of luck. But, I'm going to end up down in Daytona for kart week in 2 weeks here, just after Christmas. And, I've got my name on the entry list. I've got my favorite number, and I'm ready to go kick some butt and have some fun and play around back in a go-kart.
What's the Santino lucky number?
01.
Oh, That's my old hockey number.
Dude, I don't know. Something about that number that just like, I've always run it for a really long time in American karting. And, it's always seemed to work out for me with that one.
Yeah, I got that number as a 10-year-old hockey goalie because it was the only goalie jersey they had, and stuck with it my entire career. So I think you're in for a good number based on my my superstitions there.
Yeah, mine too.
Let's see here. So, looking forward to 2020, obviously everybody's, favorite race they can pick out is the Indy 500. If you're looking forward to one non-Indy 500 race next year that you think I'm going to go in and I'm going to have a damn good race, which race are you circling on the calendar?
Gateway.
Well, that's a good choice. I can't wait to be back there next year.
I feel like we got so gypped on that. We had put together the best car. We were the fastest all night long, and it's just sequence events. And I really feel like coming back to that race next year, if we have even close to the same package, we'll be a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, I think so too. I watched that race from my hotel room in Connecticut at my brother's wedding, and you guys had both cars were very good the entire race.
Yeah, I mean it's not often when you're in an oval like that and you pull almost an 8-second lead.
That's a good point.
Just in a half cent.
All right, so I have one random question here, and then one related to the off season here, and we'll wrap it up. Again, Santino, thanks for joining me and the late hours of the evening here to record this. No matter where you end up next year, the fans want to know, are we going to see a return of the all-chrome car in 2020?
Ooh, that'd be pretty cool. I'd love to see a return of the all-chrome car, but I don't think it's going to be very likely. I think that was if you got to see it, you got to witness something pretty spectacular, but unfortunately, I think that one is going to be left for someone else to do now.
If Greenlight or whoever makes the diecast cars is listening, we need a diecast of the all chrome.
One of the best liveries of the year car.
It was one of my favorite right from when it rolled out. It rolled out for testing, if I'm not mistaken, right back in
Laguna.
Or Laguna before that.
Laguna. Dude, the best iteration of that car was Long Beach. I mean, if you got to witness the Long Beach Hoonigans collaboration with Clydell, it was insane with the Hoonigans camo, the silver chrome, the gold chrome, and just the California atmosphere. It was just like, dude, it was like the car.
Let's give a shout out to the fantastic people that designed your handful of liveries this year. I'll let you do the shout out, but they did some great work all year.
Who did the liveries?
Yeah.
Oh man, a lot of that. So the chrome car was my idea, actually, with Yerman.
Okay.
As the and then the gold chrome iteration with the Hoonigans was the Hoonigans with ACI Dynamics kind of idea and their kind of spin on it. And then the camo car, which we drove for the rest of the year, was all Clydell manufacturing. And, that was something that they just wanted to come up with something clean, something cool, something to represent our boys. And, they thought that the camo was a very good way of doing that.
Yeah, I think that was awesome. It was one of my favorite liveries over the last couple of years. So we'll wrap it up with a kind of a general IndyCar question here. With the news of Roger Penske purchasing IndyCar, what does that A mean to you, and B, how do you feel about, the long-term future of IndyCar now versus maybe last October?
I think with Mr. Penske purchasing the complete thing, I think it's probably one of the best things that could ever happen. It's going to be his legacy, and to have someone like that come in and just rewrite what we're doing to push sponsors, to push promoters, to push fans, to push the drivers to do more, to push everybody and to put everything in the right track, the right direction to build and grow. I don't think there's anyone that's got a better business mind or anyone that's sharper out there that can do it. And considering racing is everything to him, pretty sure that IndyCar is in the best hands possible.
I love what I hear. A good ringing endorsement. So with that, we'll wrap it up here. Again, thank you very much for joining. Enjoy the rest of your off season. Hopefully, you get to announce your plans sooner rather than later. And best of luck on the grid in 2020, man.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
No problem, man. Have a good night.
You
All
too.
right, bye.
Bye-bye.